This is Kevin Pruitt with Rising Tide Startups. We've got another exciting episode today, and my special guest today is Ian Anderson Gray. Ian, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on, Kevin.
I appreciate it. I stalked Ian on social media after I saw him on another podcast with Joy Vitale in Indie Law. And do you remember that podcast? It's probably been 3 months ago.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. That was fun.
That was a great interview, and I encourage people to Google Indie Law, Indie Law, and watch that episode. But Ian, you're on our show today, so give us a little short bio and tell us who Ian Anderson Gray is.
I ask myself that question all the time. So I'm based in Manchester in the UK, which you might be able to tell by my accent, and I've always been interested in technology, but also been passionate about music. So I actually trained as a professional singer back in the day. But these days, as well as still doing a bit of singing and teaching, I help people with live video and with social media. I speak around the world at conferences about social media, and particularly with live video, helping them build their confidence in front of the camera with the technology and also the content.
Okay. So I've got to ask you, since you said you're from Manchester, are you red or blue?
People always ask me this, and the problem is I'm not really into soccer, into football, and so I don't really have an answer to that.
That may be the safest answer in Manchester. So
it probably is.
And just for those that might not understand what the question I just asked you, Manchester, the United Kingdom has two major professional football clubs: Manchester United, Manchester City. Manchester City is blue. Manchester United is red. Manchester United has been good for a very long time. Manchester City has just been good since there was a large infusion of Gulf money. But it seems to be divided like a civil war right down the city. So
it is, particularly if there's a derby and they're both playing each other.
Exactly.
And, you just don't really want to go out in Manchester when that happens.
Well, tell us a little bit about Seriously Social and how you started that.
So, like many businesses, it was a bit of a mistake. I mean, when I left music college, I started building websites for my musician friends, and then realized very early on that musicians don't really have very much money, or most of the ones I knew. So I need to diversify. So I set up a web agency with my dad called Select Performers. We started with musicians, broadened out to businesses. Fast forward quite a few more years, I always wanted a blog, and I was procrastinating for ages. And I just started blogging, and it was about what I was interested in at the time, which was social media and the tech side of social media, in social media tools. And it was an article I wrote called 7 Reasons Not to Use Hootsuite that changed it all, really, for me. And sounds quite a controversial title of a blog. But it was basically my experience with Hootsuite. I really liked the tool, but there was a lot of things that I was frustrated about.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote all about that, the things that I think Hootsuite could do better in that article, and it went completely mad. And I got a load of readers through that. I ended up speaking at conferences through my blog posts on social media tools.
Wow!
And then about 3 years ago, live video came about, and I wrote another article on Facebook Live and how to broadcast from your computer. And since that article 3 years ago, it's had about 4 million page views. It broke my website and also changed my business. So I suppose you could say I've pivoted now. I'm now live video, the live video part of social media, and helping people in front of the camera. And that excites me because all that background of me as a professional singer and as a performer, I always wondered how could I bring that into what I do today. And it seems a really perfect fit because I've got the technology of live video and the confidence in front of the camera, live video, merging together. So that's what I do. That's how it all came about.
So this blog article that you wrote, approximately when was that? What year was that?
So we talking about the live video.
The Hootsuite, the original, yeah.
Oh, goodness. Oh, that's a good question. It's probably 5 years ago. Let's say 5 years ago.
All right. So probably 2013, 14, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
So you also, I was reading this morning, you also wrote a follow-up that said 7 reasons you do like Hootsuite, correct?
Yes. Well, yeah, because I suffer with this disease called empathy, and I kind
You
of
felt sorry for Hootsuite.
I did. I felt, but not only that, I pride myself really in writing the pros and cons of all tools. I want to give the good side, the pros and the cons. And
Right.
although that article was fairly balanced, it was looking mainly at the cons. And so I wanted to talk about the good side of Hootsuite. So I've kind of, in some quarters, been known as the reasons not kind of guy, and because I've written articles on Sprout Social, 7 reasons why you should not use Sprout Social, and I'm working on an article at the moment, 7 reasons why you should not use Agorapulse, which is another social media tool. Interestingly, it's my favorite tool, but I'm going to be writing my first article about the tool, about the negative side first.
I don't recall seeing 7 reasons you should use Sprout Social.
That's a very good point, because that's in the pipeline as well.
Okay, I was just looking at
So
for equitable balance here.
It is coming. I've delayed on that one for some reason. I've just been so busy, but I do want to be balanced, because Sprout Social is, again, it's one of my favorite tools.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've only really looked at the negative side, but there's a lot of positives.
One of these days you're going to write 7 more reasons not to use a certain tool if it really goes all, as you would say, all pear-shaped.
Well, probably. Well, we'll see. It's interesting. I came across some people who used to work at Hootsuite. They actually set up their own their startup, and they left Hootsuite. And I said, "Oh yeah," I was talking with them and said, "Oh yeah, I wrote this article called 7 Reasons Not to Use Hootsuite." And said, "Oh, it's you!
Oh, it's you!
Oh yes, you're known within Hootsuite."
We have your picture on the wall in Hootsuite headquarters.
Apparently, they don't hate me.
Okay,
that's what they said to me. But maybe they're trying to be nice to me.
Companies love feedback like that, because it does identify some issues that they may be blind to.
Yeah.
So they don't like the negative press, but they love people caring enough about to point out those issues.
Yeah.
So
and interestingly, this is I actually like it when a tool company does embrace the things that they can improve. And Agorapulse is very much like that. I love Agorapulse, which is a social media management tool, because they are all up for me writing this article on the negative side, because they see that if people read the article and they see the negative points, mm-hmm. and they look at them and think, "Oh, is that it?" then they're more likely to sign up. I actually found on Hootsuite, they don't have an affiliate program anymore, but I did switch on the affiliate links on that article. And I got loads of signups. They didn't pay out very much money, so right. I'm not rich as a result of it. But there were loads of people that read that article thinking, "Oh, okay, if that's the worst, those are the worst points about Hootsuite, then yeah, it sounds like the best tool for me." And I think Hootsuite is the best tool for some people. Mm-hmm. It's just I want to give people all the pros and the cons so they can make up their own decision.
Right. Is that? Are you kind of juxtaposing that against Buffer primarily, or when you say Hootsuite, they're kind of the 2 major players. Are they? Is that true?
Yeah. Well, I also suffer from being quite pedantic, and so when it comes to social media management tools, I don't actually class Buffer as a social media management tool at the moment, because it just publishes, it just schedules content.
Right.
So if you can't really compare Buffer with Hootsuite, because Buffer just does that. It has basic analytics, mm-hmm. whereas Hootsuite, it allows you to engage. It allows you to see the stream of content across all your channels. And the same way Sprout Social does that, and all the other ones. So I wrote another article, a few articles called the Top 5 Social Media Management Tools, and also the Hidden Prices of Social Media Management Tools. And I compared the top ones. Actually, after a little bit of feedback, I did include Buffer in one of those, even though technically it isn't big, but it's just mm-hmm. because everyone's heard of Buffer.
Right.
And I hear the word on the street is that they will be making themselves more into social media management tool mm-hmm. and adding in some more facilities, such as being able to engage with people.
Right.
So we'll have to see what happens.
Kind of more of a full suite complement of tools that are, because it's, when you see articles, and I don't want to chase this too far, when you see articles, a lot of times it is Hootsuite versus Buffer, that people are making that comparison. But your point's well taken that those really, it's almost like apples and Volkswagens.
And you,
sometimes.
I'm a big Buffer fan. I love what it does. What it does is it's very simple, but it's very powerful. But you need to use, but you can't just use Buffer, because otherwise you end up being a one-way communication machine.
Right.
You're always pumping content out. So that's why I supplement Buffer. Or I used to supplement Buffer with other tools. Now I use Agora Pulse, which it does everything that I need it to do under one roof, which is really good.
Well, let me circle back a little bit, just to take a little segue here. All the things that Ian has mentioned are listed on his website, and it's a very easy website to remember. It's iag.me. I encourage our listeners to make sure you get to that website, check out his blog. There's some live video on there as well, and I want to segue to Facebook Live video. So you mentioned a couple of years ago you kind of made the shift to from just blogging about social to really talking about live video and how people present themselves on live video. When Facebook Live came out, was it not just primarily for a few users when it first came out as Facebook Live and went public, what, in the last 18 months or 24 months maybe?
So it has been around for at least 2 and a bit years. But I mean, one of the reasons why I wrote the article is that it seemed that all my marketing friends had access to Facebook Live, but I didn't. I think part of that was because Facebook tends to, with new features, they roll it out slowly to different users. And perhaps because I was based in the UK, that was one issue. But also at the time I was an Android user, and so it hadn't rolled out. So I was looking for another way to broadcast to Facebook Live, and I discovered that you could do it via your desktop. And that's how I discovered a tool called OBS Studio. And I found it really quite complicated to use, and that's one thing that really frustrates me. If like a company or developer launches a tool that is overly complicated to use and they don't do a very good job of explaining it, the empathy kicks in. I see all these people that want to use it but they're struggling,
right.
So I go to great lengths in simplifying it and trying to make it easy for people to understand. So that's what that article was all about: how to broadcast from your computer using to Facebook Live. And I went through absolutely everything that you need to know. I went into ridiculous detail. And yeah, that went completely mad. As I say, it's had over 4 million page views, and partly down to some influencers out there such as Mary Smith and Guy Kawasaki sharing that out. So thanks to them, my website broke.
Well, even in your original blog article, I mean, there had to be some catalyst that caused it to go from your personal blog to being viral. So what happened that caused that? Was it keywords, or you tagged certain words to it? I mean, how did that happen?
Yeah, so really, I've thought about this a lot because it's happened a few times, and I'm going to say something quite controversial. Although I know a lot about SEO, I don't actually think too hard about SEO. And I basically, to simplify what I do, is I write really quality, in-depth articles. I'm a slow blogger. I don't blog every week. I blog, if you're lucky, once a month. I spend a huge amount of time researching my articles and writing articles that people won't see elsewhere. And so that's the main thing. The second thing, though, is that I don't just spend my time in my office in front of my computer. I've been to conferences. So this was about 4 or 5 years ago. I after a lot of internal struggles, I decided to take the plunge and go to Social Media Marketing World in San Diego, which is one of the biggest conferences out there. And
is that Michael Stelzner?
This is Michael Stelzner's. And it was a time when my business was still young. I didn't have that much money coming through, and it's a lot of money to fly all the way from Manchester to San Diego. But I went, and the same year I also spoke at my first conference here in Manchester. I got to meet Mary Smith and Melanie Dodaro and other big names in the social media space. And through both of those, I built up so many amazing relationships, but built so many good friends. And through that, really, through those conversations, they heard about me and my content, and they helped spread the word. So I think, really, those are my 2 bits of advice and encouragement, really, is to don't just go for quantity, opt for quality, put your personality through, help people, but don't just rely on that. Also rely on relationships with other people out there who can help you get to where you want to go.
That is such great advice, and I really want our listeners to really kind of zone in on that and listen, hit rewind, listen to that again. But let me drill down one more level. So specifically on that blog, that original blog article, the 7 reasons that you don't like Hootsuite. What specifically do you think happened to cause that to blow up? Was it the keyword Hootsuite, that people were just searching for Hootsuite and found it, or?
So a few things. So it didn't happen overnight. That's the first thing.
Okay.
I mean, if you look at my Google Analytics, I think the first 2 or 3 months, yeah, there were people looking at it, but it wasn't that much. And so I was sharing on social media, but then
Through Hootsuite.
Yeah, probably. Do you know? I actually must look and find out what I was using at that time. But yeah, so it was that helped, but I think that certainly the title, the fact that it was controversial, there were so many articles. Still today, there is why you should use Hootsuite. You know, the top, and they just go into the very superficial points. Mm-hmm. So I think what it was the fact that I was actually going into a huge amount of detail. People saw that, and then they wrote an article and linked to that. And if you look at the number of links to that article, it really started to build up in that first year. So people saw that as a resource, linked to it. So that's where the SEO thing comes in. Although I didn't spend a huge amount of time on the keywords, I spent a lot of time on the quality. And of course, as many of us know, Google and other search engines, they put a lot of weight on the links to articles. Right. And so that was one thing. Also, at the time, this was maybe about a year later, this is when Google Plus became a big thing. And I don't know if you ever used Google Plus, but at the time, that was an amazing platform of really passionate and a really tight-knit community in the marketing space. And so I had a lot of links through that, a lot of conversations through that platform, and that really, really helped.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, this is all great information, and I appreciate you really taking the time to kind of get very granular. And I'm not trying to chase this to its death, but this is so important for our listenership. And so you've really kind of pivoted. I mean, your business has pivoted primarily toward live video at this stage, or I mean, give me a percentage of how much time in your business you spend on video versus social.
Yeah, so effectively these days I've got 2 businesses. So I still run Select Performers, my web agency, with my dad. Right. But the other business, which is my main focus at the moment, is Seriously Social. I do consultancy. I work with businesses to help with social media tools. That works. I do get a good percentage of revenue from affiliate income. It's not something I can retire upon, but because I do have quite a lot of readers to my blog and a lot of people looking for resources, I'm always very clear with the tools that I recommend, that I will only ever recommend tools that I think are good, whether they have an affiliate link or not. So I think people have grown to trust me, in my opinion. So that still goes on, and I will continue to do that. But so that's probably about a third of my focus these days. The rest of the business, because this is still a fairly new part of my business, it just takes, it's almost like, it is like a startup.
Right,
it's
exactly.
A startup within a startup.
Right.
And it's taking a huge amount of effort. It's hard work, because I built up a big audience, but they're not necessarily the audience. So that part of my list and my viewers is starting to grow, but I'm having to work quite hard at trying to kind of say, well, this is the new thing I'm focusing on. So I've got loads of ideas, things that I want to be doing. I want to launch a podcast fairly soon. I already have a live video show, but I'm going to be doing my own solo show as well, focused on the brand Confident Live Marketing. So I've got this new brand called Confident Live Marketing and the Confident Live Marketing Academy, which is all about helping people with the confidence of 3 things, which is the 3 main barriers I think people give for not doing live video. And that is the fear of the camera. So it's confidence in front of the camera, confidence with the tech, or I call it the fear of the gear. And then finally, confidence with the content and knowing what to say to your audience in order to ultimately, what's the whole point of this? Well, it's to grow your business, gain authority and impact with your audience to grow your profits and grow your business.
Right. Right. So, I mean, that's interesting. That's another nice segue. You've just kind of teed it up for me there. So I'm taking my driver out of the bag. And so since you've started the kind of this entrepreneurial, startup versus entrepreneurial, I mean, you said a startup within a startup. So what have been maybe say one or two pain points that you've experienced trying to launch this new endeavor within kind of a broader umbrella of your services and offerings. So specifically with the video offering, what are one or two pain points you've experienced? Maybe our listeners can speak into.
Yeah, well, I want to kind of just rewind back 2 years because that kind of puts things into perspective. So that I wrote this article on live video, and that exploded and started to. It was a really slow process for me. I mean, to everyone else, it seemed obvious what I should be doing, but to me, it wasn't. I was still doing what I was doing before, and so people were looking to me for advice, and I ended up producing a course. It was my first ever experience launching a course. So this was a course on how to use OBS Studio, and I just launched it while moving house. It was a very simple course. It wasn't particularly expensive. It started around $30. I added to it, and it ended up being $97. And it just sold like hotcakes. And it was my first ever course, and it was amazing. And it opened my eyes to the whole idea of producing a course and people just buying it, this recurring income.
Right.
Then I don't know what happened. I think I kind of pressed the self-destruct button or the self-sabotage button. And I started to kind of look at myself and think, well, I'm a bit of a fraud. I suffered from, many of us kind of probably, if we admit it, we suffer from imposter syndrome.
Exactly.
And so last year, to be brutally honest with you, and I want to share this because I know that other people struggle with this, it was a really difficult year. I went through depression. Part of that was probably I suddenly realized at the end of the year that I was getting heart palpitations due to caffeine. I didn't realize caffeine was a problem, so I had to come off coffee, which was a real downer because I love it. I've since discovered really nice decaf coffee. But last year was really hard, but it forced me into actually having to rebuild this startup within a startup from the ground up. And so that's really what I've been doing this year, starting to think, well, who is my audience? Who are the people that I can actually help? And are they the kind of audience that are willing to pay for my services? And to really kind of think that through very deeply, and to think about producing content such as that podcast, but blog posts that they are going to enjoy and find benefit from.
Right.
And that's been hard. It's been really hard after that initial high of the courses doing really well, going through that really difficult time and actually having to work really, really hard. But I know this is the right path, and it's just a case of working really hard.
Is it? I mean, let me form that in the form of a question. So, is it really trying to drill down to identify like who your avatar would be, who's your primary customer, who's niche down till it hurts type mentality, or is it more? I mean, are you talking more about the imposter syndrome? Are you talking more about just really identifying who your key customers is, or are they those two separate issues?
Well, yeah. So the imposter syndrome was probably last year, and I actually, funnily enough, I was asked to be on a podcast to talk about imposter syndrome, and I felt a bit of an imposter being on a podcast. It was hilarious. So we had a bit of a laugh about that. But the thing is, I actually think that is the fact that I understand that is actually going to be a really good benefit of me helping people, because I understand that.
Right.
So yeah, that was last year, and I've gone through so many mindset changes. I've been in some amazing masterminds and worked with mentors, and that's been amazing. And so this year, the focus has been really kind of focusing down, niching down on who my avatar is. I don't particularly like the word avatar. I think of blue aliens.
Sure. I had the same struggle, but I can't come up with a better term. So yeah.
Well, I kind of like the phrase perfect customer or perfect audience. And this is something I teach actually. When you do go live, it seems really weird. It's a very unnatural thing, because when you're going live, you can't see your audience.
Exactly.
And so you're looking at this inanimate object, this black kind of what's called a camera, but you can't see the whites of people's eyes. And as human beings, it's really unnatural. So what I teach people, what I really struggled with at the time was to actually focus on my perfect customer just behind the camera, just in front of the camera to me,
Right.
and speak to them. And that's always how I didn't realize I was doing this. But when I was blogging, when I was writing these blogs right at the start, I was writing to them. I didn't have the ideal avatar in my mind.
Right.
That's what I was doing. And so for live video and for my business, it's absolutely thinking, who are they? And amazingly, I was part of a community last year where I actually discovered my avatar in real life. And that is the most amazing thing. Your perfect customer, the customer that you love working with, who thinks you are amazing, they just can't wait to speak to you next. And every word that you utter, they just hold upon, and they want to pay you. So that's great if you can find that person, and then it's a case of producing content for that person.
Right.
And it's not the thing that I struggled with this was thinking, well, if I focus just on that one person, if I think about like it's a female who is aged between 55 and 58 who lives in this, that seems very niche, I can't find that many people. But the great thing about that is once you've found that one person, other people who aren't necessarily that avatar will still come in and be attracted to you because you're so focused on that person.
Right. It's funny you mentioned that about visualizing as you're speaking into a camera. I was doing a video, a number of years ago, and I had that very issue, thinking, I'm just talking to a laptop here, and I physically printed off little tiny pictures of people and glued them around the camera, and I thought, okay, I'm talking to the little tiny people right beside the camera button, the green light that's on the top of the MacBook.
That's great. But it seems really low tech, but it's such a good idea. The other thing I recommend, because a lot of people when they go live, not that they're narcissists, but we all tend to look at ourselves because you see a big image of yourself.
Right.
So you end up being drawn to that because as human beings, we're drawn to that human connection, even if it's ourselves. And usually the camera on a smartphone or even the webcam is quite small. So I tend to kind of like recommend people put arrows. But actually, if you can put a picture of your perfect customer, of your avatar behind the camera, and you can focus in on them, that's even better.
Yeah, about 15 years ago, I was speaking at it was completely unrelated to anything I'm doing today, but speaking at a pretty large conference. There was like probably 6,000 or 7,000 people there, and I was on stage, and it was in a large stadium, actually the Superdome in New Orleans. Okay. So half of the Superdome was this major football stadium. So they're sitting in half of these seats, and at the 50-yard line, they dropped this curtain, and that was behind the stage. And the problem was they had these like 30-foot monitors hanging down from the ceiling. So as you're talking, you're seeing your head looking at you on these two monitors, like literally right in front of you. And I thought, now that will make you self-conscious when you see yourself 20 meters tall,
And that's the other thing with live video, actually, how many of us actually go back and watch our live videos? And if you do, a lot of people will cringe and think, oh my goodness, I don't look like that. I don't sound like that. And I always recommend that people do that. You will probably hate it to begin with. But I always say to people, come out with 3 encouraging things. Excuse me. What did you do well first? And then you can then work on making it better. Because it's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about communicating with your audience with being authentic, but also communicating your message to them. And if you start trying to be perfect, you will do what I did and put it off and put it off and put it off and never get around to it. And actually, somebody last year put it very, very well and very controversially to me in a mastermind group. She said to me when I was not sending out my emails to my newsletter group enough, she said, "You know what? You're being selfish." And I was taken aback by that. But actually, she was right. If we're not producing content, if we're not doing a podcast or a live video, there are people out there that need to hear that message from us, and we're not delivering. And so we're actually selfish.
Well, I think that is sage advice, and it's a a delicate balance, between this, because I mean you could get very prideful very easily too if you lean the other way. So it's a balance of humble, trying to humbly serve your audience, but also producing, in a way that, because they're your audience for a reason. They're your audience because they want to hear from you. So that's sage advice. But before we drill down kind of in the last segment of the interview, I want to circle back really quickly. And can you just take 1 minute and talk about the imposter syndrome for any of our listeners that might be struggling with it? Just a real quick segue. How do you overcome that?
Well, first of all, can I just say that most people suffer from this? In fact, I have this feeling that I think the more successful you become, the more acute imposter syndrome can become, because it's almost.
That's why I've never struggled with it. So.
Don't say that. But I think it's kind of like the more success that you get, it's kind of like this feeling that some people feel, which is, I've got this far, but when is it that people are going to find out? Well, I think the thing is, first of all, if you suffer from that, to at least know that it exists.
Right.
And then it's a case of actually making a list of all the things you know to be true. So I actually have 2 Google documents. You don't have to use Google. You can write this down on a notepad wherever you want. But I have 2 notepads. I have, first of all, I call it the nice words file, or the encouraging words file. And every time somebody says something to me that is encouraging, or about my character, so this could be testimonials or anything, I write it down there, because like most people, I tend to focus on the negatives. Whenever anyone says anything negative, I focus on that. And the person that tends to kind of give the most negative advice or negative thoughts is usually myself. So write it down, make a list, and then read that back. My goodness, that is such a help, because you cannot deny the words that people. Well, you can, but the more you do it,
right,
that will be really, really, really helpful to you. The other thing is, which is kind of like a truths and affirmations file. And I wasn't so sure about this idea. I know quite a few of my friends were doing this, and it seemed a little bit, I don't know, wishy-washy, pseudoscience, woo-woo for me. But I now do it. What I do is I write down all the things that I know to be true. So things like, my wife loves me, my kids are amazing, all the business successes that I've had. So I write it all down there, and I look at that. I should look at it daily. I don't, but I look at it on a regular basis. And that really switches off the negative voice of imposter syndrome and puts it in its place. I think it's always going to be kind of there in the background, but this is a great way to quash that and to not give in to it.
I mean, there's an element of truth a little bit about, you talk to performers, they say, I don't ever want to lose kind of the butterfly effect in my stomach, because that gives me my edge, when I perform.
Yes.
I don't ever want to take things for granted, and I just go kind of lackadaisical and just kind of wing it, and and the quality will go down. So I always want to have a little bit of that edge and a little bit of that uneasiness, that just keeps me sharp. So, well, thank you for touching on that.
I love the way you mentioned that, because a lot of people talk about getting rid of the fear, but actually I think a little bit of fear helps you charge forwards, helps you have that adrenaline.
Yeah.
Back in my singing day, I remember 2 concerts. One where I was absolutely petrified, and I went on stage in front of a big orchestra and choir. It was the best performance I ever gave. My adrenaline was pumping through my veins. The following week, I wasn't nervous at all. I was complacent. The worst concert ever.
Wow. Well, as long as the second one wasn't in front of the Queen, we're good, right?
No, it was a smaller concert. Okay. And maybe that was partly the reason why, because I didn't have the big audience. But yeah, it's always good to have that nervous energy, that a little bit of fear, as long as you channel through that.
Exactly.
To your audience.
Not debilitating,
And it's not about you. That's the other thing. Actually, if you're speaking on stage, it's not about you. It's about your audience. Focus on them.
Yeah. Good words. Those are great words, Ian. And as like I said, as we head toward the final stage of our interview, this is my favorite part of the interview, because I want to ask these kind of drill down and really get in your head type questions. And so tell me, who online really inspires you? Who's one person that you follow very closely online that really inspires you? And I know there's probably dozens, but
There are, and I think that's the problem. There are so many, and I kind of almost feel bad that I'm going to miss people out. Have been so many amazing mentors and people that have helped me in my life, but I need to only mention one. So I want to mention one person who is just such an encouraging person to me and to many, and it's a guy called Leslie Samuel, I think his business is called Become a Blogger. I met him at Social Media Marketing World. He was a biology professor, and he left his job to launch his business as a consultant and somebody who helps people launch online business. And he's just such a humble guy. He's all the things that I want to be. He's encouraging. He's transparent. He also talks about his struggles. He wants to help others, but he's also really successful. So he's a real inspiration.
Where does he live?
So he's originally from St. Martin, but he now lives in the US. I can't tell you where. I think he's moving to Miami.
Okay.
In the next couple of months.
Okay.
If you do a search for Leslie Samuel, Become a Blogger, you'll find him.
Did he used to have like a podcast like Learning with Leslie or something like that?
That's the one.
Okay.
Yeah, he still has the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, as you can tell, I mean, the things that I'm kind of interjecting, I'm kind of a podcast junkie, so I do have to have my fix. So that's actually why I'm doing this now, is because I loved it so much that I wanted to actually be proactively involved in this space. So tell me a special life quote. You talked about affirmations, you talked about the good words and the recommendations you've received from people, but is there one life quote that you have like taped up on your wall that you read, that you look at, that's on on a Post-it note beside your computer?
The answer is I should, but I don't really. So I was kind of trying to think about this. I've created another Google Doc with quotes because I'm useless at remembering quotes. And I see this quote and I think, oh, wow, that's amazing. And then I forget. So, but there is one that I do like. It's probably not, I think once I start to get used to adding loads more quotes, I will find a new favorite. But my favorite for a while has been, if you're not living life on the edge, you're taking up too much room. And so I think for me, because I love being comfortable, I love living in my comfy chair. And I don't know if anyone's a Monty Python fan, but it reminds me of the Spanish Inquisition sketch and the torture of the comfy chair. I think we can actually all torture ourselves with feeling too comfortable. And actually what we need to do is live life on the edge with our business, actually get out there, do something that scares us and pushes us forwards. So that's something I try and do. Not always successfully, but it's a good quote.
Do you know the source of that quote? Is that yours or is that someone else's?
I don't know the name, but if you Google it, you'll find it. There is one person that did the quote. I should know, but I don't. I'm afraid.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you could go back, you choose the era that you want to go back, whether it's before you started anything, before you started Seriously Social, before you started the focus on Facebook Live. What is one piece of advice that you would love to give your pre-current self that you think would have been very, very helpful?
So yes, I think it has to be. I mean, bootstrapping your business is a great thing, but I took it to the next level, and I bootstrapped it over a very, very long time. And so I think what I would say to myself is, you need to invest in yourself and your business early on. So that actually, taking the plunge and going to Social Media Marketing World took so much effort and time to actually convince myself to do, but that was investing in myself. If I'd done that earlier, if I had hired a business coach, if I had joined masterminds, if I'd done things like that early on, I would have got to where I am much quicker, not trying to do it all in my own strength, but actually relying upon others. So that's what I would say to myself.
I know when you said that, I mean, the image came in my mind. If you do extreme bootstrapping, is that like sandal strapping? Is that, how micro can you get here?
Well, it was the pivoting side of things, because I was going from music, I was teaching singing, I was performing, and I kind of didn't want to give that up.
Right.
And so I kind of one day at a time, I started putting more towards my business, but I should have invested early on and made the switch a lot quicker.
Well, Ian, it has been a true pleasure to speak to you today, and I would love to just kind of wrap this up and just give you space. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you would love to touch on? and please just kind of remind our audience where they can find you online.
I think we've probably talked about everything. I just wanted to encourage your listeners and viewers to don't try and do this up by yourself. To try and get help out there. If you could join a mastermind group, do that. That changed everything for me. So I definitely recommend doing that. And just in terms of how you can find me, I'd love you to reach out to me. If you follow me, I seem to have carelessly scattered myself all over the social web. So you can find me, just search my name, Ian Anderson Gray. That's Gray, and my screen name is iag.me. That's IAGDOTME, just to confuse people. Because of course that's also my website, iag.me, where you can find loads of articles and loads of stuff about me. And hopefully you'll find that helpful.
Well, folks, this is your chance now. As Ian had mentioned a couple of things, and it's mentioned a lot that has been extremely helpful to us, and I am very grateful for him taking the time out of his lovely United Kingdom afternoon and spending some time with our listeners. But Ian, thank you again for speaking into this, and our audience will also have some feedback, as we discussed, before we went live, because that's really the basic premise of the whole show, is that as our listeners speak into it, causes all boats to rise in a rising tide. Ian, thank you again.
Thank you so much, Kevin.